No, not particularly. No, just the usual pressures of work, trying to go forward, I guess, making sure that this agenda stays important to all people in society, really, and doesn't just fizzle out.
When you say this agenda, what are you talking about? You're talking about your work with the Greater Manchester Race Panel, or are you talking about your work per se?
Yeah, well, race equality, really, just keeping race equality on the agenda.
Oh, right, okay. That's quite interesting, isn't it? Bearing in mind that we had our new Chief Constable last week coming out and making statements with all sorts of noise going on online. I know that was something that Andy Burnham, when he was on the show, he talked about the work that you were doing with the Police Commission and indeed the reports that you were waiting for. And when you were on the show, that was something that you talked about as well. Has there been any comment or anything coming out of that?
I know we'll be having some meetings. We will be having meetings with the Deputy Mayor and the Chief Constable. Those meetings are going to be happening this week, actually. The first of them will be this week, Wednesday.
So it's not gone unnoticed, obviously. Do things like that bother you, Elizabeth? Is it like, you're just sort of trying to do your daily job, and then all of a sudden there's like this bolt from the blue coming in that obviously is something that affects what it is, it affects what you're trying to do.
Yeah, well,
I'm saying, does it knock you off course? I think that's what I'm kind of saying, aren't I? Really.
I think I'm just going to be careful to not talk about that and just wait until I've spoken to him myself. And I think just knowing that press sometimes say things inaccurately, I'll try and get the facts first, and then I'll be better placed to comment. I don't like getting caught up in what might have been said wrongly, has been said out of context. I think the media is very good at doing that. So I'll give somebody an opportunity to, I guess, speak for themselves, and then that's when I'll comment. And then I can be very free with my comments based on facts and having spoken to the person myself.
Media portrayal is something that I know that you and I, for a long time have had concern about. Let's just put it that way. And we know very well. I work in the media, so it's sort of like, well, what about you? This is why I came out with this whole thing about telling it as it is, because I cannot bear the way that I see the, in inverted commas, news being reported. And, certainly in terms of the slant towards issues of race, I was absolutely flabbergasted, Elizabeth, that we had the first anniversary of George Floyd and nothing. There was kind of nothing, really. There were a couple of programs on television. And nothing, and that kind of feeds into my belief that people kind of think that it's done. Let's move on. Next thing, And it's really interesting. Vanessa phoned me last week, and she had a problem with somebody. Well, I say she had a problem with somebody. She happened to speak to somebody and suggest that they might do something, and this person's response immediately was, you've got an attitude. You've obviously got an attitude. The fact that she happened to have an opinion. And it was just this whole thing that, you and I talk about all the time, which is, it's almost like, okay, Elizabeth, you're an activist. Okay, Audrey, am I an activist? I suppose in terms of, providing a platform and talking about these things, then yes, and trying to seek truth. But does that mean that that's the be all and end all of us? No, it doesn't. But what it means is that because of things that are going on, it can't be ignored.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult. It's a really difficult one. It's like there is no separation from it. I remember Vanessa as well at one time saying, everything doesn't have to be related to race. But it's like, no, it doesn't. But if you're talking about something that's happening to us or an impact on our life or something, whatever, inevitably there will be, I believe there will be a race or an identity aspect as part of that.
Yeah, that certainly can be true. I mean, in terms of what you said about George Floyd and the first anniversary, I'd agree with you. Though I was part of a number of events, if you like, those people who have always been behind these concerns, and I'm talking about racism now, they continue to be behind them, and really that work has sort of gone up a level during the last year. But where we stand now, people have taken the sort of action that's gone into their organisations of, perhaps pointing an equality and diversity lead, to be an opportunity to springboard the work that needs to be done around race. But bear in mind, if they're creating EDI leads, that means you can't prioritise race in that. You've got to look at all of the strands equally. So there's a thing. Yes, so I think it's disappointing. And what you said about attitude, I hate that word anyway. That word used in our context, in the context of Black people, it's one that I would hear most often when they're talking about people at work and they're being disciplined, and you end up going through people's work record and you're saying that, well, what is it they're not doing? And you say what, you go through the work outcomes, and invariably employers kind of come back with, it's not so much about the work, it's more about their attitude. So it's one that you hear said quite often. So it's kind of, it's a real trigger statement, that one, the attitude word.
I remember when one of the things also that I remember you talking about was I came up with a statement, well, what are we saying then? Does everybody need training? And you said, well, frankly, yeah, they do. It is almost like going back to the drawing board again.
Yeah.
I wonder, Elizabeth, I just wonder, I'm always pushing. I'm always pushing for the what next, the what next, the what next. I don't know what this what next really is. I don't for the I'm saying for the first time, I don't really know what this what next is, apart from sitting back and seeing what develops and hoping that things develop. Kind of talking about a national mood or a national feeling towards us or whatever. I don't really see anything.
Well, I think once I've talked about an organisational response, what I haven't seen is I haven't really seen a societal response. And if the way that society has been deemed to respond to it is in the CRED report, the Tony Sewell's report that was written, then what that chose to do was say that it was all in our heads, essentially, and that what we were talking about hadn't really happened, or is it in our imagination? I mean, he didn't give any other explanation for why these things happen in the summary way that they do, but
well, so many people distance themselves from that report.
Mm.
You know, all of the academics who were quoted, they all said, no, we weren't. Actually, no, we weren't. We didn't quote, or this wasn't us, or that's been taken out of context. And so the whole thing, I know, has been discredited. Well, there are still some recommendations that remain at the end. And what I've not heard is anybody say, that's rubbish, you take absolutely no notice of that. And what you need to take notice of is this. So perhaps I'm, you know, I don't know. Am I missing something? I know that, you know, you guys have done loads and loads of work about it, but on an individual level.
Well, I think, yeah, I could only agree with you. And what I am saying is that I do believe that there ought to have been, or can still be, a societal response to racism. It's waited a long time, and I think if the last year has shown me anything, you know, in terms of when you talk to people who say they've seen no progress for so many years, what we require is that it's not always race on the back foot, if you like, with us trying to come up and with something, events, and trying to prove something is happening, and going to a set of people and trying to convince them, you know, whether that's about treatment in the judicial system, treatment at work, treatment around pay, you know, we can name all the things, housing, health. We always seem to be, when I say we, I'm taking people who are affected by racism, colorism, racism. We're always trying to convince people. And I think that we've never seen a response from government. Who would it be that we were waiting to hear it from? The Queen? I don't know what the British public require, but somebody clearly in those positions of seniority needs to be saying something about its existence, needs to be saying something about how one should treat one another, and particularly outlining this adverse treatment that some people in society get. And I think that has been said around certain, you know, so it's not, what I'm asking for is not something that is inconceivable. People have had to make statements like this around sexuality, for example, because if they hadn't, it would still be a crime. Let's face it. You know, there was a period of time when it was really okay for a Black person to be stoned in the street. And when I say okay to be stoned in the street, I mean in the sense that there weren't any laws to protect those Black people from the treatment that they would receive. So again, that's been us, the collective us, fighting for that to change. And when I say the collective us, I have to include our white allies who've helped us on that journey, and there are many. And you know, there has been an international response sometimes to the UK situation, but I think what we have is a situation where the UK sort of slips out of it, saying, you know, proposing that it's not as bad as the US.
You don't get shot immediately.
Well,
you know, something like that, that's what the Americans see as the difference. The difference is hands up, don't shoot. That's what they actually see as a difference. So in terms of the treatment and all of the areas that you've talked about,
yeah,
sort of see it as the same. Anyway, Elizabeth, you know, you and I will talk about this forever. Maybe this is our campaign. Maybe we need to decide what this sentence, what this statement should be. But I kind of feel that there hasn't been, you know, it's almost like an acknowledgement that that was not okay. And
yeah,
therefore,
and that's what needed to happen. And instead of that, we had politicians refuting it. And I mean, I'm in the Labour Party, but we were not happy at all, even about Keir Starmer's statement, which was like, he said something about it being a moment, you know, and it's a movement, not a moment. It's so, and that's for, you know, that's the party I do support, and will say that, you know, politically, that's who I'm most aligned to. But I think that, you know, race has always been used for votes, and people have imagined that, you know, Black people will take part in the political process, and they say an odd few words that align themselves to seeming to care. But I think actions speak louder than words, and we need to start seeing some differences. So in terms of those actions, I've seen, coming back and finishing off and handing back to you, the actions I've seen is there are quite a number of organisations who are going to measure the experience of Black people in different spheres of whatever their work is, and some people who have taken on permanent posts, or even more, who have taken on time limited posts, or 12-month posts. What does that say to you? How can you deal with equality on a 12-month basis? What do does everybody go away then? You know, so I think all of those things point towards people not thinking it's a serious problem, and certainly not viewing it from the perspective of the person who becomes a recipient of those treatments that go with racism, or any forms of discrimination, really. But in this case, we're talking about racism. So that's what I have to say in response.
Isn't that amazing? In 2021, we are still talking about the same topic that they were talking about. Actually, there was a thing that went round, wasn't there, that said it was 1618, the first time that they started talking about equality for Black people or something.
Really?
I've got a picture. I'll send it to you. It's something like 1618. Let's talk about happy things. I had talk about happy things, isn't that, you know, but even that says something, doesn't it, Elizabeth? It's like, let's move away from that and let's talk about something happy. And, you know, that's kind of what we're going on about, isn't it? It's like you can't really separate the two. You really can't. Anyway, I did have some nice times last week. I had my granddaughter here, and that was absolutely gorgeous. The second time that I've seen her, because obviously they live in London, and to have them in my house for a day, you know, when I've sort of managed over the last 8 months on Facebook and, you know, photographs, was just wonderful. And to just remind you, you know, just how precious life is and how lovely it is. You know, so that was something that was very, very nice. You know, and I did it properly this time. So I didn't do work. I just had them, and then when they went is when I started the work. So yeah, actually, you know what I'm like with my work, Elizabeth. I'm a bit like you, actually. So yeah, it was nice. It was nice to have that little separation, I think.
Yeah, I bet it was. They are a delight. I enjoy being a grandparent myself, and it was lovely to meet in the flesh your granddaughter, JJ. It was lovely to meet her. It does make me think about something, though, that we were going to talk about today. Sorry, what did you say?
I was just going to say, you keep time aside, don't you, for yours on a Sunday?
I do. I used to have my eldest granddaughter every Sunday until she sort of got to teenage years and less wanted to do that. And I understood that. And you just have to roll with that, really. You know, they all go through that. I mean, your own children go through that moment where they don't really want to hang out with you, do they? They want to do their own thing, or at a weekend go and sort of be with their mates. And really, we're very lucky. We've not had to worry about our children, sort of what they're up to, all that kind of thing. I didn't start really worrying about my girls until boys came on the agenda, and then that was difficult. It was difficult. And how much you sort of fall back into what your parents instilled in you, that you kicked it back against yourself. And it's like, why are you saying all these same words that, you know, and having the same behavior that you know very well doesn't work because it didn't work for you, but you still say it anyway. And you realize suddenly why they said what they said and how much of that comes from wanting you to be safe and protected, and you just want to protect your children for as long as possible, don't you? So it really comes from there. But in their terms, it's all about a loss of freedom and being caged in and restrictions and
blah blah blah. I know. Sorry, anyway, I did digress, and you said that there was something that you wanted to come back on before I launched into baby talk. What was it, Liz? Do you remember?
Well, you said that, you know, you were talking about something the other day, and you were talking about the particular experience of people who fall between the two worlds. I've talked today about our allies in the movement against racism, and I will say that a lot of the change, there has been, I guess the activism has come from within a Black power, if you like, within us moving to organise ourselves. But sometimes, you know, the thing that's moved the legislation on has been also having, you know, white people working for us, with us, side by side of us. And I'm no longer in the marriage, the mixed race marriage I was, but there was a time, you know, my last marriage, that sounds a little bit spectacular. It's actually my only marriage. My first one was annulled, so I have only got one marriage. But that, I was thinking, how would I, you know, I've been so lucky in some ways, so fortunate that this work, I've been doing it so many years of my life, and that when this awful thing happened, when there was the murder, I knew what world I was in. I could unequivocally, you know, sort of thump my fist and say, this was always going to happen. This is what I was telling people would happen. This is what we're facing. And people really don't care about us. And that's important, because that's where Black Lives Matter comes from. But what happens, and what would happen, when I was with my white partner, my white husband, and you're feeling Black, Black, white, how do mixed race children feel? What world have they been in through this? People having to position themselves, you know, and in that sense, I know it was easier for me. And you were talking about that, so I thought you might want to make a comment about it.
It was huge for us. You know, Adrian and I have been together 22 years. It's a long time. Adrian is white. Adrian, up until this point, no question about which side he was on. He's my husband, and you know, I knew what his politics were and all the rest of it. However, I suppose the constant examination of each and every aspect of Black life has, you know, generated considerable conversation. And we do watch quite a lot of television. So we would watch documentaries, or we would watch news reports or whatever, you know, and obviously I'm a journalist, so we're kind of keen on the news. We watch it all the way through. And obviously we'd gone through Brexit, which was horrendous. And then we went through Trump, which was equally horrendous. And we saw this legitimization of a vocabulary that I'd never known before. When I started broadcasting, you couldn't use terms like that. You couldn't sort of be incendiary. You couldn't, you know, I remember balking at saying that something was racist, and you know, I had to immediately say, and of course that's in your opinion, and we don't believe that, and blah 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 blah. Whereas now it's just commonplace, just language, just used. It's just like everything is just okay all of a sudden. You know, we
What
have a
type
prime
of
minister.
language do you want?
We had a prime minister who talks. You know, they make excuses. They talk about, you know, that was just banter. He talks about, you know, but no, sorry, it was the Duke of Edinburgh that was just banter. With Boris Johnson, when he talked about pickaninnies and letterboxes, that was because he was writing creatively in an article, and that was okay. No, it's not okay. I don't think it's okay. I've never thought it's okay. There has never been, you know, as what I believe is an apology. There's an acknowledgement that it's there, but it's been pushed aside as banter or, you know, creative blah de blah used in a newspaper. I just think if the top of the country can get away with that, what chance have we got for everybody else? You know, and it actually fills me with dismay. And but in terms of the black white thing, yeah, there's been loads of conversation, and I don't think I've seen anywhere, you know, anybody talking about what this has done. I mean, seriously, Elizabeth, it was almost like World War III at some time, because
Yeah.
whose side are you going to be on? You know, and Adrian's basically a pragmatist, and he's trying to look at things from both sides, and he's always giving you, you know, the balance view or the devil's advocate view or the whatever view. But, you know, there's clearly things that was said that, you know, I would sort of say, well, but that's a perfect example of white privilege. A black person wouldn't even say that. You know, we even have a different vocabulary in terms of what we want and what we need. And you talked about attitude. Obviously, if we can articulate what we want, and put it across like this is seen aggressive. Why is it aggressive? Because we have a point of view and we can articulate clearly. How is it not aggressive if we hang our head down and go, well, I think it was, how is that, you know? So it's, you know, it's almost an impossible situation that we find ourselves in. And this is somebody who you love, and this is somebody who you're married to, and it put incredible strain. I remember actually speaking to Olatunde Spence, and her partner is white, and she said that she never watches anything that's race with her partner ever, because she knows that, you know, comment may come or whatever, that she doesn't feel that she needs to justify, wants to justify, so she doesn't watch those programs with them.
I mean, what does that say? That's like a part of ourselves that we're sort of in denial about, because you hear people talk about their identity now. It's very important, isn't it, to call people by their pronouns if they want to talk, you know, have themselves referred to as they, because they're non-binary. And you know, why is that so important? But it doesn't seem how, you know, to be as important to be able to create a platform for you to feel all right to talk about race. That never seems to come. I hate the moment when I bring something up in an all white room, the eyes just go upwards. I just see people going,
I know, Elizabeth, but I honestly,
and or sighing, and you know, and all that body language. Sorry,
but I honestly feel that's how people feel now, Elizabeth. And honestly, unless we are, you know, Leanne Pinnock from Little Mix, or Anton Ferdinand, or who else has spoken out? Alex, the lovely singer, Alex. I always want to sing a song. I can't think what her surname is. I love her. You know who I'm talking about. She's a presenter now. She won The Voice. Oh, she won the X Factor. Alex. Alexander Burke. Alexander Burke.
Oh yeah.
You know, all of those people, if you're a celebrity, they want to hear what you've got to say. If you're not a celebrity, they don't want to hear what you've got to say. You've not got a platform.
Well, there's more of us that aren't celebrities, aren't they, going to our workplaces?
Absolutely.
You know, and as we go back to our workplaces, people have got an open wound, is how I describe it. You know, so if workplaces really aren't responding to that, well, where do you go with it? And this other dimension that we're talking about of if you're in a mixed relationship, you know, you've almost got to deny that side of yourself. I knew when I'd said too much. I knew when, you know, I would reach a point where, you know, my husband would want to move on from that. I mean, who knows, that might be the reason that, you know, we're not together. I don't know. You know, he didn't particularly mention that, but that could be driving the thought process that, you know, he had. I know I made sacrifices. You know, I wouldn't, like, I tried not to get into the pub conversation, because if you like, the general demographic of, you know, pub goers is Sun-Daily Mirror, Daily Mail readers. They're what I call, they're headline educated, and that's almost worse than they're Facebook educated or no knowledge whatsoever. Yeah, because they're so firm in their belief, because they really, I don't know, think it's all true. So what they read. Oh, making sacrifices. It seems to be making sacrifices that you have to do if you're in a mixed relationship, and you can't fully be who you are. At what point does whiteness not have to be talked about? At what point could you not, would you have to deny who you are, your heritage, where you came from, stay silent, be silenced? No, is that right? Is it right? And what then do the children who will be known of as Black, I mean, I always make that very clear, you know, when some people are sort of feeling like there's a choice to be one thing and another, there is no choice. You know, there is no choice. You people, as far as they're concerned, you are Black, so there's no point trying to assimilate in any other way.
Well, you know that dual heritage people are now saying that actually, no, they will not identify as one or the other. Why should they? They're both Black and white, so why should they have to say I'm Black, or why should they have to say I'm white? I'm both. I'm dual heritage. That's what I am. So there are people who are saying that. They're saying, you know, why should I have to say? My immediate answer would have been your immediate answer, which is you are perceived as Black. It makes no difference what you think you are perceived as Black. But what I've come to accept and acknowledge is that's what I think. And it's not for me to impose what I think upon somebody else who is mixed race. So if they want to say that they are dual heritage or they are mixed race and they don't identify as one or the other, that's up to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think all that is fine until you get to the point where, you know, I just remember that film, Imitation of Life, you know.
Absolutely.
And choices do have to be made. And that was so many years ago. You know, even the Lana Turner version, which was in the 50s, that followed a version that had been made in the 30s, the late 30s, that film was made.
Oh, I know the Lana Turner.
Oh, gosh, yes. Claudette Colbert.
Oh, I think. No, you see, Elizabeth.
Oh, you know I'm a Hollywood.
Elizabeth loved, absolutely loved film, drama, and actresses, and especially going back to our black and white, the Betty Davis, the Joan Crawfords. Oh my word!
Yes, I love those people. I really did. You know, I went to see her grave. You know, when I went to LA.
I didn't know that.
Oh yes, I went. I mean, seems quite strange. You go up to the Hollywood Hills. You go to Cedar Heights, so you can go and look at some people's memorials. But it was fabulous, and what a beautiful place it is. It's just roaring. It's like you know, very lots of hills and beautiful scenery. Oh, gorgeous, lovely, lovely, beautiful.
you have to pay?
I mean, we didn't. I
Right.
think the question, I don't think we did. I don't think we did. I don't think we did pay. But you know, behind there are the Hollywood Hills. You see, you know, the big Hollywood
Well, I
sign
don't
and
know anywhere. I
everything.
don't know anything
Yeah.
about it.
Oh, that was one of my dream trips.
Oh,
So look, yeah, I know we've touched on that. That's interesting how you say it all levels out now. And I wouldn't take that from dual heritage people. I wouldn't take it from my own daughter, who is, although she feels it differently because she's Italian and Jamaican, she feels, and doesn't, you know, she kind of sees it differently. But I think, yes, people should be allowed their own sort of category, their way of thinking. But when I see young boys being hauled into police cars or, you know, aggressively treated or wrongly or rightly arrested, they really are not taking the time to say, you're dual heritage, you fit in a different category. They never say that they're come here white lad. They always definitely say, refer to those people, to people in that category as black. So I think society perceives you as black. And no, you don't have to take it on board, but that's the way it's going to be anyway. So yeah.
well, maybe it is until we change it, Elizabeth. I don't know. I mean, it's not our fight, is it? Or is it? Is this one our fight?
I don't know.
I feel the opening up of the conversation, you know, the things that I don't, you know, I'm even thinking to myself, I mean, what purpose does that serve? But it was so intense, Elizabeth. It mattered so much that it can't be ignored because wasn't it? It's huge and it's different. We do feel differently about whatever is going on. So, you know, a news report happens, blah, 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 blah. I feel this, he feels, seriously. Yes, we
I
will.
think it is a big thing.
We will
I
come
think
to
it is, and I think it's not spoken about. It's not spoken about because it's not illegal here. But I could tell you how many times. I mean, my husband was Irish heritage, so you know the amount of rooms we used to go into where I knew I was being treated different, and I would say to him, not all the time, but I think it took me a while to say about it. And then he'd feel like, well, in loyalty now, he needs to not like these people who've treated me in such a way. Well, that's caused rifts between friendships and family rifts. And as I say, I had a part of his life I couldn't be in because I think he was almost frightened to get me into public spaces because more often than not, if I'm talking, I might relate something that is going to make other people feel uncomfortable. That's what it was. He didn't want to take the chance that I was going to make somebody who was a friend of his feel uncomfortable about them being just who they are.
But you know, Elizabeth, that's so interesting because that is just what I'm talking about. And that's what brings me back to this. You can't get away from it because, you know, again, 3 weeks ago, I was introduced to somebody and this is blah, 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 blah. And this is such and such a person. She's a teacher. And then it's like, oh, no, she's not a teacher. She's just been promoted onto the senior leadership team. I looked at this woman. I said, how old are you? 26. How long have you been working at this school? 2 years. I said, do you know what happens with black people in schools? I've just written a piece about how difficult it is for them even to get onto QTS. They're being kept on QTS for up to 4 years. That's before they can even be given a teaching position. So they're being paid on a lower rate because they're not. We're talking about teachers who are coming in from the Caribbean and Africa. I've written a piece about it, so it's all there. You know, Professor Miller talks about it. It's his life experience, and it's the difference of coming from black man country and white man country, and that's the language that he describes it in, and that's how we talk about it. you know, and it is like you can't escape from anything. So this girl arrived at my house. She's lovely, this woman. She's 26, and it's fantastic that she's been promoted onto the senior leadership team. But the reality is that Black people are not being given those positions. And in schools, in terms of the senior leadership team, there's only 3% that are non-white. 3%.
Yes.
That's the people
And that
leaving
is
our
the
school.
British experience as well. So that, I have a lot of friends in
Okay.
NEU, one who's quite a powerful speaker, and she's one of the reps for Black workers at TUC. She did an absolutely astounding speech when it was Black Lives Matter, just reeling out these horrible statistics which show and prove again and again and again: we're least likely to be employed, most likely to be disciplined, first to be out the door, never on the senior leadership, rarely head teachers. Well, there are some places,
No,
when you go into London and so on.
Elizabeth, I've got the numbers. It's something like 237. Trust me.
Oh, there you go. Thank
I've
you.
I've actually got the numbers. You would
Thank
be
you.
horrified. There are more secondary schools in London than there are non-white head teachers. It's 230 something. Seriously, I've got the statistics. There's 18,000. It used to be 20,000 Black teachers. It's now 18,000. So it's gone down by 2,000. And of that 18,000, it's something like 300 and something, who are on senior leadership teams. And then you go around secretarships. But the point of it is this not being able to escape for it. This woman just came to my house to visit. She was just visiting my house, and she just happened to say that this was happened to her, and this was a good fortune. So immediately I'm like, that's fantastic, but do you know what the reality is? So straight away I'm in with this, and as you say, Adrian, sort of going, really is this relevant at this situation? It's like, well, it is relevant at this situation because we're talking about it now, but it does lead to.
But do you see that? So it's like, so this is what I'm talking about, Audrey. I feel that there is a silencing. And especially if you're in those partnerships, I know how many times I didn't say something. So if he thinks he was ever under pressure, my husband, then God help him if I'd have really spoken at the level where things did take place. The amounts of times, they would never, if we both somewhere having a meal, that they would always refer to him, almost just ignore me, even if I was coming back to say, oh, could I have, or do I need, it was overwhelming. So I think if you made yourself to be aware of those things, you could really create quite a catalogue. And what you do is just try and put them to one side and act like nothing's really happened. But actually, that is all part and parcel of what the unrest was that was within people. That when the George Floyd incident happened, that's what was coming up for people. This sort of pressure cooker of feelings and experiences that people have been keeping down.
Suppression. Oh, my darling.
Well.
Next week.
Well, yes. Yeah. So that was interesting. And I'll make sure to post this. I'll send you the link. And I hope people enjoyed the chat. Please let us know your comments. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Absolutely. And if you've got something to add to this conversation, let us know, because Elizabeth and I are convinced that this is a runner, this one, this mixed race thing. We are convinced that there is mileage in this. I've talked about it very, very superficially. Elizabeth mentioned a few things for examples, but if you're living this, be very interesting to hear what you think too.
It is. So do you have a thought about what you'd like to do next week?
No, isn't that awful? Shall we see what the week brings? I'm very excited. I'm going back live. We could talk about
What about this MIF thing
Yes, we've
you
not
be
talked about
doing?
the Manchester Festival. We could talk about that, of course.
Should we do that? Okay, so let's talk about arts. So next week, please join us to talk about arts and culture.
Absolutely. I've just posted last week's show and I've said, if you're serious about arts and music, just press play. Because there's 4 examples of cracking acts that are on at the Manchester International Festival. And I will get the plug-in because I'm working with them and they are supporting me. I'm curating special shows for them. So it's all pretty cool. So yeah.
Oh, that sounds good. That sounds good. Well, I look forward to seeing you then.
Okie dokie, sign off.
Bye.
Until next time. Bye bye.